Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is, ethically speaking, a case study on conflicts of interest. And now let me throw it over to Dr. Roseanne Maria Galili to introduce herself and the rest of the panel. Roseanne?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Ethically Speaking Tuesday topics. This is the third session that we've had on Ethically Speaking Tuesday topics at CNHB. This week's Tuesday topics will be on conflicts of interest, and we're very pleased to have Marjorie Boone from Financial Compliance Analyst in the Office of Research Compliance with us to shed some light on this topic with us. And also joining us are Dr. Connie Perry, and Zach Hathaway. Next slide, please. So why focus on responsible conduct of research? We know that RCR is sometimes used interchangeably with research integrity. And what's really critical is that all of the federal funding agencies, the NIH, NSF, USDA, have specific policies for RCR, and this includes ongoing training over the course of one's role as a student or faculty member. Next slide, please. So we have instituted this series to fulfill the requirement from the NIH for continuing research training for scientists at each career stage. Next slide, please. And today, we are covering conflicts of interest, personal, professional, and financial. In the winter quarter, we will be covering responsible authorship and publication. We will, in the spring, be covering collaborative research, including collaborations with industry. And as you can see, then we have topics planned for summer and then fall next year, winter and spring. If anyone would like to lead or co-lead one of these Tuesday topics, please reach out to myself, Darren, or Zach, and we will work you into the schedule. So thank you. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Marjorie Boone, who will walk us through conflicts of interest.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marjorie Boone. I am one of the financial conflict of interest analysts we have in the Office of Research and Innovation here at Drexel University. I have over 20 years of research administration experience, and with compliance, I guess it's been, 7 years or more? But I've done cradle to grave, I've done post-award. I love research administration, and I love investigating potential conflicts of interest in all levels. So anyway, let's talk about what are conflicts of interest. Conflict of interest may arise in human subjects research when researchers and or organizations have financial or personal relationships that may compromise or appear to compromise the integrity of the research, protection of human subjects, and or reputation of the researchers' organizations. So when I look at research administration, conflict of interest, or an analysis, we're looking to identify if there are personal, individual conflicts, which would include, researchers who are involved with the design, conduct, and reporting of the research. That's a very, very main factor that we look at. And it could be the principal investigator, co-investigator. We're going to go over that in a little bit, but it just matters whoever is involved with that design, conduct, and reporting of the research. Institutional conflict of interest is more so when you have a board member or the president or someone of that nature who is involved with an outside entity, and we receive a grant from them or some type of financial support, and then you have to look at whether or not it could be biased because of who is coming through. Financial, and so that includes pretty much relationships that may appear or may not give the appearance of a financial connection. And a quick example is I created some type of IP, and now it's up for sale and it's doing really well. Does my research influence I mean, my sales influence my research, and am I willing to tamper with or deal with the research integrity of my product? That's major. It seems simple, but it's major. Next slide, please. So, institutional conflict of interest, we really in our office are not as involved with that unless, like I said before, it's quickly identified that one of our deans or board of trustees, chairs of those people have disclosed, because they have to through the university, the annual university reporting, if they do consulting, advisory, board membership, and things of that nature, have IP with the company. And we do collaborate. So what happens is, based on the questions that are answered on your annual conflict of interest report with the university, they generate a report for me, and I do a comparison to see, not to see, but to make sure that that researchers or have disclosed outside entity relationships with the university, which is $50 minimum, right? Or with Office of Research if you're doing research within the institution. And they only give me the information for researchers, not the president. I don't know what John Fry has going on out there, but for everyone else, I pretty much will have. Next slide, please. Okay, so COIs of any type may impart potential bias. I think that the biggest thing that my previous supervisor used to always drill in my head was anything that deals with human protection, the ROB, we have to be particularly careful with, because of history with situations with unbiased biased science and how things were done in the past. So I always look at anything that deals with human protection a little closer than I would with anyone else, only because we just have to be sure that things are being processed properly. And so that includes, believe it or not, even with procurement, are we using vendors that might have a conflict, a faculty member or a staff that might have conflict with a vendor that we're going to buy supplies from? All those things do make a difference. I'm not going to read the slides word for word because they're here. Zach and whoever put these together did an excellent job. I'm just going to try to highlight as much as I can to give you a roundabout understanding of conflict of interest. Next slide, please. Key definitions. Who is an investigator? So we like to think that investigator really is the principal investigator, but it can be anyone who is deemed responsible for the design, conduct, and reporting of a research project, especially funded by PHS. And so, there are situations, times where a PI cannot, a principal investigator cannot be principal investigator of his study because of conflict. So he or she may name someone else in that position. So that's why it's inclusive of anyone who's responsible for the design, conduct, and reporting. There have been but occasionally it might even be a consultant who is funneling through Drexel to get their research completed, and that they're involved, and so we have to make that determination. And it sometimes gets a little sticky, but it's fine. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I can pretty much judge and try to move things quickly. So when we look at a SFI, a significant financial interest, it's something that consists of one of the following four items listed: remuneration for a publicly traded entity within the last 12 months. That's key. When we first started this process, I think that we looked at it overall, but the regulation specifically says, and so does our policy, that it is any income you would have received in the last 12 months from a publicly traded entity, or income from a non-publicly traded entity in the last 12 months. And we usually look at that at anything that exceeds 5,000. Anything under 5,000, we still notate it, but it's not necessarily considered or deemed automatically as being a significant financial interest that would that we have to do a management plan for. The other thing that we look for is the IP, intellectual property. There are a lot of our researchers that have IP, or they have an IP can include a questionnaire, it could include a device. it's numerous things that it consists of, or it could even be a formula that for a specific type of research. So we have to look at all of that, and I go online and do research on it. It's interesting. And then I guess the other main thing that we have to mention is reimbursement for travel, sponsored travel. If the travel is paid for by the federal, state, local government, or educational, higher educational institution, it is not, does not have to be reported, or it can be reported, and then we deem it as not being a SFI, even if it exceeds the $5,000. So the four things that we look at are to determine if someone has an FSI, again, is remuneration or income from a publicly traded entity, a non-publicly traded entity, IP, and reimbursed travel. Next slide, please. So PHS has been, I think, must have been the very first federal agency that said we need conflict of interest regulations to be updated. Then came along the USDA, the FDA, and then NSF was probably about a year after NIH came out. And the main thing that I try to express to our researchers and to the administrators who upload the documents is that you have to disclose at the time of proposal submission. Crucial. Because at that point, we have an opportunity as a university, representing the universities, to review whatever you've disclosed and to make a determination whether or not an FCOI management plan is required, financial conflict of interest management plan. If it's NIH or PHS, we have to report that to the ERA Commons. And the university is responsible for doing that in a timely fashion. And I'm going to give a quick example. So a few years back, we had a subcontractor from Canada who had a disclosure, and we were ending year one when they finally disclosed to Drexel, to me, our department, that they had a potential conflict of interest. And it needed to be reported because they were involved in the research. And do you know that because they were so late, and I kept hounding, but I kept getting documentation, that NIH requested from us, Drexel, a timeline breakdown to show that we had done due diligence, to show that we had requested information, but the university in Canada did not comply in a timely fashion. And I don't think they received year one funding. They did not release that funding to them. They were not, we were not allowed to pay them for their subcontract. It was a minimal amount, less than $20,000, but it was more principal. And then year two, we had to make sure that we documented the report properly. And I like to do things right. And I think that the institution, that's my job at Drexel University, is to make sure that reporting is done in a timely fashion. And so if you ever have anyone that you know, whether it's a subcontractor, one of your PIs that has to disclose an outside relationship, please do it in a timely fashion. Focus on trying to do it at proposal submission time. That's very, very important, because it's easiest for us to sort of track and document then that we were aware of it. Next slide, please. NSF. So like I said, they came in about a year or so after the PHS with their regulation changes, and also say at the time of proposal submission. FDA. So I was reading this earlier with FDA. They're a little bit more lax, but they do require disclosure to the sponsor and to the IRB. That's not always as easy to identify. I think that our IRB FCOI disclosure process is getting better. It's changing. Many of you may have worked with them and know what I'm talking about, Zach. But I think it's getting better. It's better now than what it was initially when I started with the process. So if a researcher is dealing with anything with FDA, they have to disclose to Drexel, Office of Research, and they have to disclose to Institutional Review Board. I mean, they have to do it because it's a part of their science. And I would think that anyone who has a gadget or formula or whatever, that they would want their research, that no one will be able to question their research integrity if they've done things the proper way. Next slide, please. Drexel has a newly created this year COI committee. We still have a lot of things that we have to do with it. I think they're still working maybe on the charter, and then they have to approve changes to the FCOI form questions that we had on Form 1, Form 2. And they also have to, I guess, as we go into InfoEd, approve those changes as well. I'm looking forward to InfoEd. But anyhow, we have a newly formed FCOI committee, and I think Dr. DeMaria is a part of that. And then the other thing that we have to do is, as needed, we have to create FCOI management plans. And so I have a new director of compliance. Her name is Heather Skinner. And unfortunately, she could not be with us today to participate in this. But anyway, her new process that she's implemented with us, that you all should be getting, or whoever has a management plan should be getting those documents in the near future, is that now we create a master FCOI management plan when it's needed. And then we have a project list that we attach or include, add to your project list any new research that you have that includes projects that fall upon our research management plan. And it's not just generic, it is detailed for that specific person on their entity, outside relationships, and it could be 1, 2, or 3 entities that they're involved in, but so we make it so that it covers all of these. Now, the benefit of that really fast is that it gives us an opportunity to receive a proposal or be notified that an award is here and that a management plan is needed, whether the sponsor required immediately or just in time, or it's an IRB protocol that's being reviewed. And we create the master management plan. And then we just add all the different projects to that project list. I enjoy it. And when I first was introduced to that process, I was a little hesitant because I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be difficult. But it's not. And so when that proposal or protocol comes through and your outside entity as a researcher is involved, it's just a matter of adding it to the list. And then we would recirculate that list back to the investigator or the researcher to make sure that, that they agree with what we have and that it's data is correct. So it's about, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Next slide, please. Management examples. So I looked at this list of 5 and I said, okay, well, let me think, what's the most important to us? It is important as a part of the management plan recommendations that the researcher discloses on the patient consent form that they have, they have a COI to report, a FCOI to report. It is important that they include disclosure on all publications and presentations of the study results. And then I looked at the the number 1, which says use an independent third-party review data. That is something that we are implementing more now than we have in the past. And this is under the new process that Heather Skinner has implemented. And then, of course, we look more at the IRB to make sure that the study design is correct, more so than, because I'm not a professional in that by any means. I don't proclaim to be an expert with that. So we look at the protocol. I mean, I've spent many a nights just going line by line and or doing searches on the protocol to determine maybe to make sure that we understand, what the IP might be about, or the formula, or the device. And then what we also do as a part of our investigation, and it is an investigation, I go online and I research it. I mean, I research it until I can't find anything else. And any hit that I receive pretty much online, I look through and read through and try to make sure that we understand it enough that I can support whatever management plan that I've created, that we've covered all recommendations that might be required for that particular person. And so I was thinking about number 5. I don't think I've had to have anyone to divest of an organization to eliminate a conflict. I'm gonna take that back. I did have 2 researchers here at Drexel who were involved with a student SBIR project that he needed a management plan, and those 2 employees did send us documentation saying that they were divesting themselves from that particular company and giving all rights to the student. And so I do take that back. That was just one time that occurred. Next slide, please. Drexel policy. Well, this is our original Drexel policy that was created probably back in 2012. Part of the FCOI committee or the COI committee will be to approve our new updated policy prayerfully in the near future. Same basic information, but easier to interpret. I mean, I think that this one was, it satisfied the needs at the time in 2012. But they are updating that, so we can keep going. All right, so let's talk about the COI forms. So I looked at this slide, and Zach, is my mistake. I saw it said in Drexel 1. COI disclosure annually is required. Oh, next slide, please. Is required through Drexel 1 for all Drexel employees, staff, faculty, everyone. So that has to be done. But then on the other side, just so everyone understands, it's the second piece is if you're part of a research project here at Drexel University, and you are identified as key personnel, and you are a part of the design, reporting, and conducting of the research project, you have to disclose through Form 1, everyone. If you have nothing to disclose, that's it. But if you have an outside relationship, then you have to do the Form 2. If you answer yes to any of those questions under the Part B, that form is also changing in the future, hopefully. So, and then if you are a researcher that has more than one outside relationship, you have to submit a Form 2 for each outside entity. And unfortunately, right now, you have to do it with every proposal or protocol that you submit through Drexel University Office of Research and Innovation. I know that is can be frustrating. However, that is our process at this time. When InfoEd comes in, and I'm throwing myself out there, I was told a couple of weeks back that it looks like we've been given the nod to purchase or be included in InfoEd for conflict of interest. And it is to my knowledge, based on conversations that I've had with other institutions, because we had actual 1 hour sessions with about 4 other outside institutions to see how they liked InfoEd for COI. And there's some things about it that we really are looking forward to. And one of those things is you would go in as a first timer and put in your conflict of interest information, your disclosure information, one time. And then when you go in the next time after time to put in more proposals or protocols, instead of having to enter the information each time, there should be a question that asks, does your outside relationship, is it involved with this particular research? And you say yes or no. If you say yes, you might have to give us a little bit more details in reference to that, just so that we can totally understand the connection. Or if you say no, that's it. I mean, I think right now, the biggest challenge that we have is with our researchers. They feel like if my outside relationship is not involved in this particular project, why do I have to continue to disclose? Why do I have to give you these forms? That is our process at this time. And so in order for us to be consistent in what we do, we have to ask for them. And I'm quite sure I've been called a few names because I ask for them all the time. And it's not that we don't trust you. It is our process and our policy, and we have to be consistent in what we do. So we follow the PHS regulations, and so this is part of how we perform. Let's see here. When should you disclose? So there are a few times. Always at proposal submission. If by some chance something changed in between when you submitted the proposal and when the award comes in, then again at award submission. Some institutions have their PIs do it every time. Let's see. So when do you have to disclose? The proposal submission or prior to spending on the fund, internal fund. For sponsored projects involving human and animals, they are designed so that you're supposed to disclose prior to starting any animal experiments or any human participation. So what happens if I create a new outside relationship after I've submitted my proposal? you have within 30 days that you identify a new outside relationship to disclose it to the Office of Research and Innovations. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the last piece, of course, is annually. I think that with InfoEd, to my understanding, that's where our annual disclosure will be for research administration, is when you do your initial proposal and you upload all of your outside information. That's considered an annual. I think that at that point, at implementation, we have to determine if it will be from January to December, or if it will be from the date that you do your first proposal. And because at that point, we'll be able to run reports through InfoEd to know who should be updating their FCOI disclosures. So we're really looking forward to that. Next slide, please. Oh, it's the case study. Are there any questions about conflict of interest? Any additional questions?
Hi, Marjorie, it's Roseanne. So yeah, I have a couple of questions. So and maybe to clarify. So at the time right now, is your office are you the only person that actually reviews all of these papers that come through the financial?
I am the primary contact, but I have Derek Blanks, who's the export control analyst. I'm not sure what Derek's title is anymore. He is cross training, because if I'm out on vacation or whatever, I still have to check. Even when I had COVID last December, I had to pick my head up enough to check to see if there were any COI issues that couldn't wait. And so Derek started training more heavily with it, and he's a good resource. He still comes to me quite frequently for support, but he understands the basics. Let's put it like that.
So I guess so when we do our annual conflict of interest form for the university, is that a separate office that reviews those, or do you have to review them too? Because it seems like there's a lot that, if it all falls on your desk, how do you get under all of this paperwork? Because, like for active researchers, we do the annual one. Every time we put a grant in, we have to do one. Every time we submit to the IRB, we have to do one. And sometimes they're connected. So that's just a lot, of work for you, as well as, I'm just thinking of it on the other side. If you're the only person that's reading all of those, that's a lot.
The annual through the university, through Drexel 1, is done by university compliance. And those, anything that they identify as being a potential conflict of interest or whatever, then it flows through your hierarchy. So your department chair or VP or whomever will be the person that would have to help, clarify that and identify whether or not it's something that can be managed. As far as the proposal submissions to CODIUS and the IRB, yes, I am the person and have been the person all along. So unfortunately, we try to upgrade, make changes with CODIUS Lite so that we could connect the protocols, IRB protocols, with the CODIUS Lite proposal. And unfortunately, that didn't work very well. And there's a COI tab under the CODIUS Lite for proposals, and it has nothing behind it. We spent months trying to come up with scenarios and things to make that a working module for us, like they did with IRB. And then we found out there was no interface, nothing. Then we were trying a different process and look with Maureen Wade when she was here. And then unfortunately, Maureen passed, then that went out the window. So right now, our best, at least and I pray it works, is the InfoEd. And then for Drexel to purchase the COI module. And they promised me they would.
Okay.
And so that's what we're going for, because it's all about trying to make it easier for you all, the researchers. But I can't make it any easier if the university doesn't support it and they don't give us the tools to make that happen.
No, and I think, if you're the only person, there's only so much, it makes it easy for us, but it's all funneling through you. So that's not very efficient either, right? It's not an efficient process. Yeah. I also had another question. When you mentioned about the FDA, so if we're filling out the financial conflict of interest forms, And if it's something that deals with the FDA, you say you still have to disclose to the IRB. What does that mean? Because I guess researchers think we're putting in the FCOI forms. What more needs to be disclosed?
So based on what I saw on the slides, and according to the regulation, when you do your Form 1, Form 2, that's disclosure to Office of Research for compliance review. But I think that when you fill out the IRB forms, they have questions there that ask you about, I guess, your FDA IP. That's the disclosure piece.
Okay, I get it.
That was my interpretation of that slide.
Great, super.
Right, because I've had Gabby come to me in the past when she first came, especially, and I remember, I forget who the PI was, and that's immaterial, but they said that they had they were working on a device similar to a previous device, and that similar to really bothered her, and it took us a while to get that straight, and finally, we can only base what we know in the Office of Research, for compliance, based on what you as a researcher tell us.
Mm-hmm.
What I asked you, what do you mean by similar to? You say, well, this is like, the ABC module, and then we added D and E.
Mm-hmm.
I can only go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might have people who have questionnaires and they are paper for years, and then they become electronic versions. So that makes a difference. And I always think about Dr. Robbins. Dr. Robbins and her MChat started out on paper. Doctors use it all over the world. And now she has an electronic version. So, we had to figure out exactly what that meant and was that something new. And then they did a video version, or they're working on the video version. So, it can go on and on. And so I make it my business to understand what you do, what your disclosure is. And like I said, I research it on the internet as much as I can, based on what you tell me, what I find on the internet, to just make sure that we understand it. Because if someone comes up and asks questions, like through an audit, I have to be able to support what I've written. And I have to do an analysis on every single Form 2 that comes past our desk, whether it's involved with the research project or not. I have to make notes on it. And I started doing that. That was the way I was introduced to looking at the COI years ago. And I'm going to tell you something, it's coming quite handy. People always say, well, cover your butt, make sure you know what you're doing or that you have documented information. And I've had to go back and find emails from the Mike Edwards days to support why we made a determination a certain way, or the fact that they told us no, but that really was yes. And then they maybe got special privilege or something like that once in a while. So there's been just document. I keep a spreadsheet. I keep it, up to date because I need to know what's going on.
Well, that's good to know. That's good. Any other questions? This was really, really helpful. So I guess we're all looking forward for info ready to come our way, right?
Oh my God, yes. For COI, it's going to be a blessing for everyone. So they say. No, it really. With the conversations I had with like the other 4 institutions that actually use it, it's not gonna solve all of our problems, but it is going to make it so much easier for the researchers to deal with the COI by uploading those, by putting putting information in there one time and being able to click yes or no if or not your outside entity is involved with each proposal or protocol that comes through. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Because I think we're going to go over to the case study. We have about 20 minutes left. And I don't know, team, if we need to really break up into groups, but I think we could probably just do the discussion like this. And Zach, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure thing. And I just want to thank you again, Marjorie, for all of your insights and for taking the time to join us with how busy you are. So for today's case study, we're looking at a university who signed a subaward with ABC Tech, a small company under an NSF grant. The subaward contains appropriate provisions for academic freedom, data rights, and other intellectual property rights. Without telling the university, Professor Hammer signs a 1-year consulting agreement for $12,000 with ABC Tech for closely related work, and uses his graduate students, without paying them, to work on the consulting agreement. The consulting agreement contains the usual terms: company ownership of intellectual property, prior approval of publications, confidentiality, and work performed on a work for hire basis. In a conversation with Wally Cox, the assistant director of the Research Administration Office, he finds out about the consulting arrangement through a slip of the tongue from the tech's president. In thinking about it, Wally decides that it would be better not to pursue this further. He reviews the subaward statement of work and thinks there is little likelihood that there will be any inventions resulting from the work. Besides, as long as the work under the sponsored project is completed and the university is paid, telling his boss in the Conflict of Interest Committee would just raise unnecessary questions that might jeopardize future funding from ABC Tech. In addition, Professor Hammer knew what he was getting into when he signed the consulting agreement, so if any problems arise, Wally feels that it will be Professor Hammer's fault.